Hello, everyone. Welcome back to In the Art Podcast with your hosts, Colin Stavala and Brandon Cox. As we record here on Friday, November 15th, it's fight night between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, but that's not what Brandon and I are going to be talking about this episode. We're actually going to be giving you our biggest surprises of the NFL season as we approach week 11, Brandon, I think you said.
Yeah, we had Thursday Night Football
Right, it's
was the start
crazy.
of week 11.
Week 11, that's today's Friday, so actually week 11 already started yesterday
Yeah,
between the Eagles and the Commanders. But yeah, I can't believe it's week 11 already.
flies
Um,
by.
Bray and I are going to give you some reactions that we have, players, teams, biggest surprises, biggest disappointments, biggest accomplishments, contenders, pretenders, everything in between, right here in the yard. So stay tuned for that. Um, so Brady said, I think you said before we started recording, you wanted me to kind of lead the way just to start.
Yeah, just give them a topic. You know,
One,
we've
one.
go
I don't
ahead.
know if I'm biased here, Braden, but one big surprise to me has been the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay,
I don't know
we
if you're
could
on the
talk
same
some
page as
Steelers
that. I don't
football.
know. I don't know if you had high expectations for them, because going into the season, you didn't really know who was going to be the true starter, especially come week 11, right? Because they started off with, you know, I think Russell Wilson was named starter, um, and then Fields started a couple games, and now Wilson's the starter again. Is that right?
Yeah, Wilson's been the starter for the past 3 or 4 weeks, something like that.
Yeah. So
Undefeated.
yeah. So that goes to show you how, usually when you have a two quarterback competition like that at the NFL level, even the college level, it doesn't really work very well.
Yeah,
But the Steelers are sitting at 7-2, I think now.
seven and
Seven,
two, seven
seven and
and yeah, 7-2.
7-2, and they have are they on bye week this week?
No, they got Baltimore
Or and they
on
play
Sunday.
Baltimore.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's just a big surprise to me. There's a lot of questions surrounding the Steelers going into the season, especially at the quarterback position. You have George Pickens, but other than that, you don't really have many receivers. Their defense obviously is always going to be good.
yeah.
Um, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it's a little biased in me considering I'm a Bengals fan, but for them to be 7-2 going into week 11 is just mind-boggling to me, bro. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think if you would have asked me like 6 months ago, I think I would have been surprised, right? Because they seemed like that they were kind of a mess. Like we looked at them as like, oh, this is the team that's gonna finish, you know, around 500, 9-8, 10-7, something like that. Like you're gonna get that every year with the Steelers. But like we've seen in previous years, either the Ravens or the Bengals, win the division, forcing the Steelers on the road in the playoffs. And there's not much there. You know what I mean? Like last year, I think they went to Buffalo. Maybe that wasn't last year, or maybe they didn't make it last year. I don't know.
I think no, that
But
was last year. They lost. They got smoked in Buffalo. I think that was
yeah,
last year.
so that's kind of my point is like, I don't really know if I could see this team like doing much. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks with the quarterback position. Now you got Fields, you got Wilson. You started Fields. He was 4-2, 4-2, 4-2, something like that around there. So he had a winning record, and then Tomlin made the ballsy move to say, okay, we're going with Russell. Um, and it's obviously worked out so far because he hasn't lost a game yet. What I will say about the Steelers though is you got to kind of pump the brakes here, right? Their last 4 games, they blew out the Raiders in Vegas. They blew out the Jets. We'll talk about the Jets. They won by 8 against the New York Giants, and then they beat the Commanders by 1. Right? So, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the
I think the
Steelers
Commanders was
because
a big win, and that was in
it
that
is
was
a big
in
win.
DC too. I think that's
It
that's kind of a statement win. But yeah, go on.
100%, 100%. My thing is I think this team is 100% improved from what we've seen the past 2-3 years.
Mhm. Well, they have they
My
have a
problem
comp
is
they
can
have a
you see
competent
them?
quarterback now. That's
Say
that's
again?
that's the difference. I was gonna say it's because they
Yeah,
have a competent quarterback now. That's the
they have
difference.
exactly. They have a competent quarterback now, but in the playoffs, right? Let's say, I mean, we don't know if they can even win the division, right? Because we still got Baltimore. The Bengals, what are they, 4-6? So they're not maybe probably contending for the division, but still in like the playoff race for sure.
Mhm.
Um, like, would you trust the Steelers to go into Buffalo and win that game? Or would you trust the Bills? And I know that's like a kind of a high standard to put them at, especially after we kind of talked to them negatively for the past few years. But like, I still need to see more from them to really believe that this team can contend, right? They made the deal to go get Mike Williams, so now you got Pickens and you've got Mike Williams, and Mike Williams made his impact made against the Commanders this past weekend, right? So again, I think this team is good, maybe even great, right? But I still think that they're like two steps behind a team like Buffalo or Kansas City, and even like Baltimore. Like, I get the
Baltimore's
Steelers
gonna
will
be a big
probably
test
take
for
a
them this
game or two.
weekend.
Those are going to be close games regardless because it's division games, right?
That's fair.
But like, to me, like if you were to ask me like who's the better team right now, the Steelers, the Ravens, I'm picking the Ravens. And it's not even a diss on the Steelers at all. It's just I think the Ravens better quarterback, better offense. Steelers probably edge on defense. Coach is kind of a toss up. So I don't know. We'll see. They do have a lot of. I mentioned how they haven't really played anybody. I mean, they played the Commanders. Yes, I'm not taking that away. They lost to the Cowboys. Dak was healthy, so it's kind of like, I don't know. But they got their next 4 games are all division games. They got Baltimore at Cleveland at Cincinnati and then Cleveland again. And then the schedule gets really tough.
Then they play Cincinnati, I think, week 18.
Yeah, week 18. But sandwiched in between that, they got Philadelphia, Baltimore, Kansas City.
Oh, it's tough.
It's tough.
I mean, you're kind of positive though, because you took care of business against the weaker teams, and you're sitting at 7-2. So realistically, you only got to win 3 of those 6 remaining games.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. 7 remaining games, but regardless,
7.
I need to see more. I need them to go and play a team like Philadelphia and like look like the better team. You know what I mean? Like they beat the Commanders and we're high on the Commanders, right? But again, it's still a rookie quarterback. It's still a very young team. Like, I just need to see more for me to like be like, oh, this team is a legit contender. Again, anything can happen. And the Steelers are the kind of team that could maybe go into a Buffalo and give Josh Allen a ton of problems and win a game like 16-10 or something silly like that. You know what I mean? In the playoffs.
Yeah, of course.
But to me, it's just you need to see a little bit more. But Russ has been great. The team looks really good. Again, I'm not taking anything away from him. I think I just need to see like a little bit more of a challenge in them to like really step up. And I'm not even expecting them to go and play Kansas City late in the season and win. But like if you're going toe to toe with Mahomes.
Yeah, we'll come back to this topic after week 17 or 18 or so. Then I think we'll have a better idea of like who we could expect, especially going into the playoffs, assuming they do make the playoffs. I think they will.
Like 100%. Like I would say, if you ask me, is this team a lock for the playoffs? I would say definitely. If you were to ask me, is this team a lock to win?
I think FPI had it like 99% for them.
Yeah. But if you were to ask me, is this team going to get to the divisional round? If they have to play in the wild card round, that's still a question mark for me.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean?
Let's see.
So.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. So now give me your kind of the nail on the head with everything there. You just don't know about the Steelers. It's very haven't played any great teams yet. And then again, can you really trust them in the playoffs? And I think these next few weeks are really going to determine like if we could trust them or not in a wild card divisional championship game. So yeah, Brandon, give me your biggest surprise, or not even to be a surprise, it could be your hot take, anything here.
Yeah, I mean, I could go a lot of different ways. Something I will say about this year is like, even if I just look at like the playoff standings right now, the 6 teams that would be in, or I guess it would be 7 teams in the AFC, be Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston, I guess is somewhat of a surprise, right? I mean, like we expected them to be good. But there's such thing as a sophomore slump. It doesn't look like that, that's having too much of an effect on them. And they lost Stephon Diggs for the year with torn ACL. So, that obviously stinks there. Ravens are there. And then probably the 2 teams that I would like to talk about as surprise is to me are the Chargers and the Broncos. And that might be like not where you thought I was going with this at all. But the Chargers are 6-3. I think they're like the quietest 6-3 ever. Um, if I pull up who they've played, um, or who their losses are to, they lost to Kansas City, they lost to Pittsburgh, and they lost at Arizona. Like Steelers on the road, tough game. Kansas City, inevitable, right? So
Right.
really, like this team, I'm not saying that they played a ton of great teams so far, but 6-3 is still impressive. They got a new coach with Harbaugh. I think you have your answer there.
Yeah. I mean, I think going into this season, I wasn't really high on the Chargers just
Yeah,
because it was a brand new head coach and typically takes them a year or two just to get adjusted to the NFL
yeah,
head coaches. But I think, I think his players, I think Justin Herbert's had enough experience to,
yeah,
help him, kind of help guide Harbaugh through.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, I wouldn't say I would agree. I would say I'm not surprised because the Chargers they're good. They're a good team.
yeah,
Justin Herbert's a great quarterback, but I wouldn't have expected them to be 6-3 going into week 11.
yeah. And just another point on the Chargers I'll make is again, they haven't played too many people, but they play Kansas City close. Yeah, they lost in Pittsburgh. Like, I don't know. It's like one of those teams that I feel like could surprise in January. You know what I mean?
No,
If it,
I
if
mean
the
I don't think you'd particularly want to play them
yeah,
in for a first round playoff game.
yeah, like I said, and I mentioned the other playoff teams, and we talked about Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston, Baltimore. Like, if there's a world where the Chargers get matched up with Houston, I could totally see the Chargers winning that game. Right? You know what I mean? Obviously, Kansas City, Buffalo, like those ones, I probably would lean, the Chiefs to the Bills there. Steelers, I would need to see more. I think the Chargers are just like a year away kind of deal. Like I like where they're at, and I could see them like this year being like they're gonna get a wild card spot, and maybe they get a win, they get to the divisional round, and then maybe they get sent to Buffalo, they get sent to Kansas City, and then it's just like you know what I mean. Then they just lose there. Um, but like going forward, I have a lot of hope, and I have high hopes, I guess I should say, for the Chargers because I really do think Herbert's a great player. I know there's a lot of talk about him being overrated and whatnot, but you know, there's something about Harbaugh that you have to trust it to work, even if it doesn't work in the first year. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
far, 6-3, it's working. And not to jump to another point, but basically the entire AFC West is impressive besides the Raiders, right? I don't know if we got any Raiders fans out there, but you guys are kind of in a bad spot. But Broncos, Bo Nix, 5-5. Like I was not expecting that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting. I was expecting the Broncos to struggle this year because they got a first year quarterback, but Bo Nix has really adjusted to the NFL really well. Um, Again, would I pick them to make the playoffs? Probably not because I feel like that. Even though the Dolphins are 3-6 and the Bengals are 4-6, I trust both those teams more than the Broncos right now. But we'll see what happens. I could see the Broncos being special if Bo Nix continues to progress, and improve because it seems like every single week he's played better. Like if you look at the stats for the Broncos Chiefs game last week, which the Chiefs won on like a blocked field goal, some crazy nonsense, of course, that only Chiefs witchcraft could come up
Right.
with.
Right.
But if you look at the stats, Bo Nix had a better day than Patrick Mahomes. And to me, that's like
I feel like it's a common theme. It's been a common theme. Like quarterbacks have been outplaying Patrick Mahomes like head to
Yeah,
head, but for some reason the Chiefs just find a way to win the game.
yeah,
I know you can say if it's Andy Reid, if it's just like the experience that Mahomes has, it could just be the Chiefs organization as a whole. It could be the defense. Um, but yeah, I think I noticed a common theme. Like a lot of times, quarterbacks are outplaying Mahomes in those games, but the Chiefs just find ways to win.
yeah, yeah. I saw some stat and like you wouldn't please don't quote me on this. But it was something like that. The New York Jets have, you know, overall have led for more game time minutes than the Chiefs have this year. And the Chiefs are 9-0 and the Jets are 3-7.
That's crazy.
Because the
If it's
Chiefs
true.
play bad and then like it just works at the end, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um but yeah, I mean that's my takes from the AFC. I don't want to knock any other teams down. I mean, like the Dolphins have struggled, but that's a team that I could see getting hot. And really they only struggled so bad because Tua missed like a month. Um, there's the Jets. We can go on about the Jets if you want. Uh,
We can hit the Jets real quick.
yeah, I mean,
Um, I mean,
sucks.
I can't say I'm surprised though. Like I wouldn't say I'm surprised. We knew Rodgers was getting old, right? Injury
I'm
last year,
surprised.
definitely. I think the injury last year definitely not only, you get ask all the what if questions,
It
right? What if
aged
he
him,
was
yeah.
healthy for 2 years with them? But at the end of the day, he had a setback. I just think probably too hard for him to overcome at this point. Um, but I know you've been high on Aaron Rodgers, since day one as a Packers fan, right?
Yeah.
So tell me why you don't think it's a surprise.
Well, I think it's a surprise in the sense that they're 3-7. Like if you would have told me they're going to be 5-5, I would have been like, yeah, they're probably not. It's probably not going to happen because they're an average team, but they're far below average team, which is what surprises me. You know what I mean? If you would have told me back in August that the Jets would be you know right around mid pack, I would have been like, it's possible because Rodgers came off an Achilles. But if you told me they would have been like a bottom five team in the AFC, I would have been surprised. Which is what they are. You could argue that the Patriots are playing better football than them right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just got blown
Yeah.
out by
And
Arizona,
then
and
and
I'm not
then
taking
you had
anything
the
away
whole
from
the,
Arizona, but
you had the whole thing with the Salah firing.
yeah,
You don't really know if Rodgers had something to do with that. I know you're saying before you don't think that Rodgers did. I think Rodgers had everything to do with the firing. Um, but I don't know. Did Rodgers maybe bring some toxicity to New York with him?
possible.
Hasn't been working out. Like, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, like, yeah, that's totally a possibility. Like that Rodgers brought his antics to New York, right? Like I would never sit here and be like, nah, there's no way that's the case. But if I were to like blame it on one thing or another, I would really look at the injury last year because
That's fair.
like again, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Jets would be in the AFC playoff race this and last year if Rodgers was healthy. Um, but like he played 3 snaps last year. Like he didn't play football for 2 seasons or for 2 years, I should say, roughly 2 years, a year and a
Right.
half. At almost 40 years old, like that matters. You know what I
Yeah. One hundred
mean?
percent. 100%.
It's kind of like what I was talking about with the Chargers, where Rodgers comes to town. Salah has a decent like recognition in the league as like a solid head coach. Um, I feel like if Rodgers was healthy last year, I wouldn't have necessarily said, yeah, this team's going to go to the playoffs. This team's going to contend with teams like Chiefs and Bills. But I would have been like, there's an expectation now that they're good. He goes down and they're bad, right? I felt like if he would have been healthy last year, that they would have been able to build upon last year and have an even better season this year. Him missing last year, I think, really hurt this team. And quite honestly, I think it's wraps. Like they went and traded for Devonte Adams. That seemed like a fire alarm deal to make. I get Devonte wanted out of Oakland or I guess Vegas, and Rodgers is familiar with Adams, but like everybody's playing bad. It's not like you can just look at like, oh well, you know, Devonte Adams hasn't been playing well, and they had to trade Mike Williams, and Alan Lazard isn't great, and Rodgers is good, but like everyone else around him has been bad. Which was largely what the narrative was when he was with the Packers. Was he was a superstar and he was playing with a bunch of bums around him, and he's like, "Well, I can't win the Super Bowl when I'm throwing the ball and and I'm handing the ball off to whoever, right? You know what I mean?"
Mhm.
Um, a lot of it was blamed on the defense. He's got a good defense in New York now, so it's kind of like I think the injury last year really screwed up this franchise for like the next 5 years because again, I'm not going to sit here and say they would have won a Super Bowl, but I feel like if he would have been healthy last year and if they would have went even like 10-7, right? Because I think they still went like 8-9 last year without him.
Mm-hmm.
You put Aaron Rodgers in there, you're probably winning at least 2 more games, right? You maybe make the playoffs as a wild card team. You weren't going to be ahead of Buffalo. You probably get knocked out in the first round, but you could sit here and say, hey, like this largely is working. And then you would have been able to go into this year and take that next step and maybe go for 12 or 13 wins.
That's
But
fair. That's a good point.
That's really what yes, Rodgers' antics, I feel like was 100% at play. You could sit here and say like, oh, like he was largely responsible for Saleh going. But if you're the Jets like general manager and owner, like you can't fire your best coach. Like they fired him and they've been awful since.
Yeah.
They would have been far better off with him. Like they wouldn't be 3-7 if they had Saleh. I'll say that much. Maybe they're like more of like a 4-6 or 5-5, but like they're just bad. Like, and I would say New England overall is probably playing better football right now, which is crazy. So surprised, not really because of the injury, but I'm surprised at just how bad like they're at rock bottom here. So
Cool. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, just there's this. I don't think you could point to one thing. I don't think you could point to the injury specifically. I think probably the antics, new system for Rodgers, getting older now. The injury definitely doesn't help. I'm not saying it wasn't a factor at all. Um, but yeah, I think everything kind of just got worse and worse slowly. And the next thing you know, you're 3-7 with no chance of making the playoffs. You don't have a real head coach.
yep.
You fired a very good head coach. I don't think they should have done that. Um, but yeah, I just think the Jets are probably going to be asking themselves a lot of questions these next few seasons or so. I
I'll
think
just
they're
throw this out
poorly
there.
poorly run organization. I think at the end of the day, it's what it is, and it's really showing. I think Rodgers is getting frustrated. I think that's why they fired Saleh. Um, and yeah, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, and I think that's all fair. And listen, man, like he's 40. He could walk. Then what do you do? Like now you got Devontae. You've kind of brought a lot of what he had in Green Bay into the Jets with like Alan Lazard and whatnot. You've got 2 really good running backs. You got Brees Hall, who we all know is a stud. Like, what do you do now? You don't have a quarterback. If he could retire, and if he were to retire, I don't think anybody would really blame him at this
I
point.
think he's going to. He's going to have to.
Like he says he's going to play next year, but like we'll see how the rest of the season goes. But if he doesn't see it going anywhere,
would the Jets even want him to play next year or whoever he ends up on?
well, I mean, I don't think he's going to another team. I think he's either a Jet next year or he's done. I just don't
Fair.
like I don't know what the future even looks like for this team because you went and you traded for Devontae and you traded for Rodgers. You know what I mean? Like you can't really make a move now. And like what team out there would the Jets be interested in making a trade for their quarterback for? Like I can't really name any unless like, and I know like I've had a few talks with people about this and it's crazy and would never happen because the franchise would like the fans would never get over it. But like Jaguars are 2-8 with Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could probably get a ton of draft capital for him. He's young. You know what I mean? Like, is that something that the Jets maybe try for like a really desperate team? I don't know. Like there's a lot of question marks, and I feel like the Rodgers Achilles tear like sent this team into like worse than what it could have been, right? Because now like you ship Zach Wilson out of the building, and it's because if you had Zach Wilson as the backup and Rodgers retired, you'd be like, okay, well, we're not gonna be great, but we're not gonna be like awful. But now it's like, what's next? So I don't know. I really don't know. I hope Rodgers doesn't retire. I would love nothing more for this to kind of work for the Jets. I don't think that anybody's beating the Chiefs in the AFC, respectfully. Maybe the Bills, maybe the Ravens, But like, if he were to come back next year and not to go out on top, but like have a good final year, because if he goes out the way that the Jets are playing right now, it's just that sucks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You want to go out like Peyton went out.
Winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Or even Brady went out. Like, regardless, like I know the Bucks weren't that great that year, but like he was
Yeah.
still like a pretty good player.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. We got 7 minutes here. Did you want to shift over to the NFC?
yeah, I think the NFC is a lot more cut and dry.
That's true. That's
Um,
true.
just
So
from like the
if you have another AFC take, you can. I mean,
No, I mean, I think we basically covered everything. We talked about the Steelers, the Bills. We expected them to be good, but they're really good. Chiefs 9-0. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season, like, oh, the Chiefs are going to be 9-0, I probably would have been like, nah, they're going to lose a game or two. Like,
no,
it's
I mean,
just,
I would have believed they were 9-0, but not with the way that Mahomes is playing.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like, it's I think the more shocking fact is Mahomes isn't playing that great, and they're still 9-0.
yeah. And they probably
That's just,
shouldn't be 9-0 because they've
yeah,
lucked their way into some stuff. Not
yeah.
to,
Of
not to
course they did.
like
Of course they
bring
did. Don't
that
me
kind of stuff
started.
into it, but like,
Um,
they beat Tampa in
yeah. I
overtime.
mean,
Buff or not Buffalo. I think they played Buffalo this weekend, but like the Broncos field goal thing was just kind of goofy. Um, but yeah, I mean,
NFC. Yeah, like you said, everything's kind of cut and dry. Like you have a few surprises. Like the Falcons, I didn't have them. I
I
didn't have the
had them.
Falcons and the Cardinals. I think you did.
Yeah, I
Um,
so for me, just across the NFC, I'm just gonna go from the bottom up, because we both expected. I had the three bottom teams in the NFC, the Saints, Panthers, and Giants. I picked them as the worst teams in the league this
yeah, I
year.
think everyone did.
They've kind of been that. I know a lot of people were high on the Saints like the first 2 weeks of the year, but it was fool's gold. Carolina's a mess. The Giants are really, really bad. Cowboys three and six.
Sucks
Not
to be a New York football fan. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. No, Cowboys. I'm not really too surprised. Like I would hate to throw that as a surprise. I would have
I'm not
expected them to
surprised.
be like at least like a wild card team
I don't think I had them making
because
the playoffs in the beginning.
or like near the playoff picture.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think that they would be a little bit more in the conversation if Dak doesn't get hurt.
Nah, of
But they're
course.
done. Like their
Yeah.
season's done. They got no run game. It looks like McCarthy's lost the locker room. He's gone. If I had to guess, and maybe this is a hot take, I think Deion Sanders is the head coach of the Cowboys next year because I think that's just
You think
what.
he's leaving? You think he's leaving Colorado?
Yeah,
I don't think he's
I
going
think
to.
I could totally see him. I think if he's the only two teams I could see him on is Colorado and Cowboys,
Dallas.
and I think if Hunter, like if all these kids are going to leave, he's going to be like, I'm out. Especially if they have if they make the college football playoff, because he would be like, well, I turned the program around. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And go out on a good
So
note.
we'll
Yeah.
see there. Tampa at 4-6, I had a little bit higher expectations, but like 4-6 is still like not bad. Like you can still get to the playoffs with that. Um, Rams, just so many injuries. Like they're not great. I think the losing to the Dolphins was kind of the nail in the coffin for them, just because like
They're
the
still
Dolphins
4-5 though. Like they're not
they're
out of
still
it.
alive for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, they beat San Francisco earlier in the year. Like I'm not taking anything away from them, but I would say that basically every team ahead of them besides the Bears is better than them. Right.
Yeah.
And like Miami went into LA and like kind of dominated them. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
forget what the final score was, but from the beginning of that game, Miami felt like the better team. So I don't
I
know.
agree.
Like
I agree.
Seattle, I had higher hopes for, but 4-5 is tough. The Bears are bad. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what the record says, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Packers fan. Um, I don't know. I think it's a coaching problem with Caleb because he started the year. A lot of people were like, "Oh, Caleb's a bust. Like the Bears screwed it up again." I think he's much closer to like a Trevor Lawrence or like a Justin Herbert level quarterback than Trubisky or Justin Fields. And I'm not even taking anything away from those guys. I think that's just a reality situation. He has the talent. Um, I just think it's a coaching problem. I think firing the OC was scapegoat. Um, I don't
Let me
know.
ask you
It
this
might
about
just
the NFC, Braden. So as a playoff picture currently stands, do you see that being the final playoff picture, or do you think it's going to mix up a little bit before the end of the season?
like the seven teams that are in.
Yeah,
The only I could San Francisco will get in.
over who?
Probably San Francisco's the West. if I had to guess, probably the Cardinals.
I agree. Yeah,
Because
you'd have to be.
I think Washington is a wild card team. I think Green Bay is a wild card team. The Vikings, they've played bad like the past, like they did win, but they haven't played well the past
I
few
mean, they're
weeks, and they've
7-2
got
though. Like, can't look
their
past that.
schedule works well for them too. They've got
Yeah,
Tennessee, they got Chicago. They'll probably get in. The Vikings will
yeah,
probably get in. I don't know if that's where I would have the teams ranked, but they'll probably get in. I think Atlanta will win the South. Philadelphia
yeah,
will easily win the East, and Detroit will easily win the North.
yeah. How about the
That's
Eagles looking dominant?
Yeah. I mean,
I
the
mean,
thing is
weak
with
division. I knew Saquon was going to help them tremendously, which he has so far.
yeah,
Um,
to me, I think
I'm not surprised by the Eagles being 8-2 though. Like, they're a good team.
I'm not surprised at all that they're 8-2. But last year they started the season very well, and then
Yeah,
they kind of
and
fell
the year
off.
before
This
too.
year they
Yeah,
kind of had struggles too. So I don't know. Like the Eagles, to me, 8-2, really good. Still kind of a question mark. Like you feel like it can totally like spiral out of control again.
fair.
Um,
I don't see it happening this year though, especially with the weak division. Because
yeah, I mean,
look
if we're
who's
gonna,
in the division. The Cowboys. I mean, Commanders are good,
yeah,
but the
the
Eagles took care of them
Commanders are
last
like
night.
to
So
yeah, the Commanders are similar to me, like the Chargers, where they're a good team. They're not a great team. They will get to that point.
yeah,
Maybe
okay,
next year, the year before, I could see them being much more of a contender because yeah, they played Philly. It was a close game. They both went into the game with 7 wins, but like yeah, Eagles didn't play well, but you just felt like the Eagles were the better team.
they're
You know
more
what I mean? And
experienced. You can
maybe
see
that was
it.
the home
Yeah,
field advantage at play,
yeah,
but something
yeah.
like that. And
And
Detroit
Brady,
is
I
I
guess we
was
have
just
less
gonna
than a
say
minute
Detroit.
here. Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
you're good. I'll just end with I think Detroit's a monster. Golf throwing 5 interceptions is obviously kind of a concern, but also not a concern because they shook it off and still won the game. So it
Fair.
sucks being a Packers fan that I kind of gotta watch that for the next who knows how many years. They're probably gonna make a Super Bowl or two at the current rate that they're at. Um, but I still think, mid-season where we're at, and I'm sure you'll probably say the same thing too. I think it's still the Chiefs to lose. I think
Yeah,
it's just
that's
they
fair.
might not be the best team, but they're 9-0, and I expect them to make it to the Super Bowl and still win.
That's fair. All right, thank you for listening. In the yard, like, comment, subscribe, and let us know your hot takes and react to ours in the comments below.